Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 326 of the All Dolphins podcast. This episode, proud to say, powered by BetUS, new sponsor of the All Dolphins podcast. Always happy to welcome any sponsor. Anybody who wants to sponsor the show, by all means, reach out. Probably the best email address these days would probably be fnalldolphins@yahoo.com. But right now, we're a big shout out to BetUS as a new sponsor. And this episode, 326, is going to dive into the joint practice with the Atlanta Falcons at the Baptist Health Training Complex, the first of two. And we'll skip the history lesson for now. We're going to dive right in. And I guess we'll start with just a very quick summary of your biggest takeaway, Perk.
The defense did a good job. The first team defense, specifically the pass rush. Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, not out there. Emmanuel Ogbah does a good job. Chop Robinson, good job. Zach Sealer, good job. And might I add, this was not due to a lot of blitzes from safeties and cornerbacks. This was defensive line, man on man, out physicaling the Atlanta Falcons offensive line. Also, not a lot of twists and stunts by the defensive line. Pretty much a straight rush. They did a very good job on day one.
Okay, before you tell me how to spell out physicaling,
yeah, no.
I love that word. Very remiss on my part not to even introduce my guest for today, my guest host. Then again, you already know the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Chris Perkins from the South Florida Sun Sentinel, where you can find his work at sunsentinel.com and as well as his regular Dolphin Deep Dive with Perk, aptly named, because if it was Deep Dive with somebody else, it would be kind of weird. So let me preface this by saying, and in the interest of full disclosure, so people know we're not BSing and we're not making stuff up, in a joint practice, first of all, any practice, it's very difficult for any one set of eyeballs to watch everything that's going on because there's drills all over the place, even on 11 on 11. If you're focusing on the offensive line, then you're not following the ball and you don't see what happens at the point of the ball the play is. If you're focusing on the ball, maybe you miss something on the offensive line. Now, double that when you have a joint practice where there's half the field, it's Dolphin offense versus Atlanta defense and vice versa on the other field. So we kind of split it. We try to see as much as possible, but this is where we rely on our colleagues. And some of it is, hey, what'd you see on that play? What'd you see on that play? And then some of it is what we actually witnessed. I was focused on the Dolphin offense versus the Falcons defense. And my quick takeaway is the offensive line was meh. There was some good work. There was a lot of plays where there was pressure. Most of the pressure, however, I will say, came on blitzes. And there was one play, for example, where Tua would have gotten sacked in a game situation, what we would call, or I call, a would-be sack. Yep. And on that particular play, Devon Achane picked up the blitzer, who was, I believe, cornerback A.J. Terrell, who was a terrific player, picked him up very, very well. But after that, there were three other guys who got on Tua where he would have had no shot. Needless to say, the big play of the practice, probably from both sides, was a bomb from Tua to Tyreek, who got behind Mike Hughes, the cornerback. And Mike Hughes shouldn't feel bad, not the first cornerback to get burned by Tyreek's speed. And again, it was a perfect pass by Tua. Tyreek got behind him, and and it was funny. I don't mean to not necessarily take a shot, but dispute what Tyreek said. But Tyreek, after practice, was asked about the play, and he says, well, this is a play we've been trying to get, and we haven't been able to do it because our defense has been locking it down. And I'm like, what practice have you been watching? Tyreek gets behind the defense every single solitary practice. It almost feels, it almost feels like anytime the Dolphins want that, they can have it.
Yep. And even a couple of times against Jalen Ramsey. A couple.
Correct. I mean, Again, the dude is just uncoverable. I mean, it's freakish. And this is where, again, Tyreek spoke after practice. And I have somebody making my cat meow all over the place here, and that's kind of distracting. So hopefully that stops very soon. Unlike Dave High's dog barking the other day. I have meowing cats. So what that says about us, I have no idea. But Tyreek
Wild
after
Kingdom,
practice,
baby.
so what?
Wild Kingdom.
Pretty much. When a parakeet, you want to have repeat our talking points here, Perk?
Let's do it.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
That one. There you go. So Tyreek after practice was asked about his reaction to his great weekend, top 100 number one, then the contract reworked. And Tyreek was basically like, I don't celebrate that anymore because it's just one more accomplishment, and talked about how far he's come. And he did bring up his prediction in 2017 when Tom Brady was the number one player about how I'm going to come for you and get it. Then he talked about his team goals, which are winning a playoff game, which obviously would be, I think, the least of the goals I would hope for this team.
Yeah, it's the bare minimum goal, and I'm glad to hear players mentioning it so much now as opposed to last year where they were talking about winning the Super Bowl. Now it's kind of like, well, we need to win a playoff game before we can win the Super Bowl. So I'm glad that I don't care if they talk about winning the Super Bowl because that is the ultimate goal. But I think they're more fixated on one step at a time, especially when Mike McDaniel scheduled those meetings at 24 after the hour to signify the Dolphins have not won a playoff game in 24 years. So I think there's a renewed emphasis on step one. Let's win a playoff game. Then we can talk about winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and here's the thing about that whole thing, though, is they're not playing a playoff game until January. So right. To me, I don't like this whole focus now. I think we can all agree that would be the least of what the Dolphins need to accomplish this year for the season to be a success. But okay, let's take care of the first part first. And to me, maybe a bigger goal would be win the division, ensure a home game. But we should focus, instead of big picture, on this joint practice. Let's bounce back and forth between what you saw, because you were focusing more on the opposite field with the Dolphin defense. I was more on the Dolphin offense, which it's not perfect. Look how beautifully we complement each other.
That's right.
Talk about one thing that stood out to you, then I'll go ahead with one thing on offense, and we'll bounce back and forth. So go ahead, give me maybe, do we want to talk about I don't want to say brawl is too strong a word.
Well, I'll tell you what happened, what I saw. Drake London catches a pass across the middle. Ethan Bonner kind of casually comes up to him and tries to make the tackle. Drake London is like, this is big boy football. He throws Ethan Bonner down to the ground, and then a Dolphins player comes up from behind and shoves Drake London, and then it's on. Players from both teams kind of meet in the middle. I don't know how many punches were thrown. There was some aggression. There were some players who were locked up with each other. I think there were two separate piles of players kind of going at it. But I don't know that – I think that everybody was smart enough to know I'm not going to throw a punch while this dude's wearing a helmet because I might break my hand. And so there was a lot of pushing and shoving. Tempers definitely flared, but it didn't get out of control. And I'll tell you the thing that I like about that, Poop, is that with all the talk that the Dolphins did about getting tough, you didn't see any fake tough guy, oh, we're going to fight, we're going to show them that we're tough. It kind of ended right there. And I like to see that because I don't want to see the fake tough guy stuff. I want to see the pass rush getting in there on guys. I want to see Jalen Ramsey blitzing and disrupting the pass like we've seen, like we saw against the Falcons, like we've seen the previous 2 days. Let me talk about Jalen Ramsey briefly. This dude is setting a great example the last week or so of how you need to approach the game and how you need to actually execute against the run, against the pass, being out there every day, being accountable. He gave that speech to the team about this year we're going to be the bullies. And even Mike McDaniel said Jalen Ramsey's been on a heater the last 5 days. This guy is doing everything right, and he's setting a great example for that secondary. He was strong again today, and really what stood out was Jalen Ramsey against the run, something that he's not known for. So Jalen Ramsey bringing the energy and setting a good tone for that defense the last week and again today.
No, I agree, and yeah, no, he's been balling.
Yeah.
There was the beginning of a little skirmish on the near field as well, and this is where I'm going to suck because I can't remember the players involved because it didn't really amount to anything. So I wasn't really writing down a ton of notes. So, but bet down that I can't remember the details. What I do remember is that Teron Armstead, who didn't participate in any of the competitive drills again today, as an abundance of precaution, he is wearing a compression sleeve on his right leg, I want to say. So that's something to monitor. But Teron Armstead very quickly got involved in there, and Calais Campbell did the same thing for the opposite skirmish. And these are very, very well-respected veterans around the NFL. On top of that, they're very large individuals, so maybe that helped simmer things down. But there was nothing, major that happened. You mentioned Jalen Ramsey. Did not take part in the one-on-one session that preceded the 11-on-11 stuff, which was, linebackers covering tight ends and running backs, offensive linemen versus D linemen in the pass rush, wide receivers against cornerbacks. From my end, what stood out was Tyreek Hill went 3 for 3, was 3 receptions from 2. However, they were all short patterns. And again, you're trying to cover the middle of the field, half the field with Tyreek, one-on-one, nothing but space. Good luck. And this is where I mentioned AJ Terrell from the Falcons, a very, very good cornerback. Actually had very good coverage on the first 2 plays, but Tyreek created a little bit of separation to put the ball on the money, and it's a completion. Lost my train of thought. Jalen Waddle. This is worth noting. Didn't practice again the second 2 days in a row where he shows up at practice late and he's in sweatpants, not working. Obviously, there's some sort of issue going on. We don't get a ton of details from the Dolphins. Much to my chagrin, there are other teams around the league who will tell you. For the Eagles, for example, will give you a full report with player and body part who's not practicing during the day. Dolphins don't do that. Why? It's their prerogative. They don't have to do anything injury-wise until the week of the regular season when they have to put out an injury report. So the first time we're going to get body parts really is going to be on that Wednesday, September 4th, I want to say. So something else, that's River Craycraft had himself a very, very nice outing. He is also wearing a compression sleeve on one of his legs, but he got open and he made play after play, didn't drop a pass, unlike Willie Snead IV, who had 2 nasty drops. Your turn, something on the other opposite end of the field.
One matchup that I saw today that was very tight. Javon Holland, the Dolphins safety, against Kyle Pitts, the Atlanta tight end. Very good matchup there. Probably a standoff today. Each of them made plays. I'm really looking forward to seeing that matchup tomorrow after both teams and both players have watched some film and seen what the other guy was doing to him. Let's see how they come back tomorrow. Javon had a play. And I think you saw this, Poop, in the corner of the end zone. I think it was Javon and Kendall Fuller. Both went after a pass, and they hit the ground. Javon got up a little bit gingerly, but he got a little bit of attention from the trainer, but he seemed okay after that. So I think he came back in, as I recall. I don't think that there was a problem, but I don't think that it was a major problem, but we will make a mental note of that and see what happens tomorrow. The entire secondary, I thought, did pretty well. The starting secondary, I'll say, I thought did pretty well. The second team for the Dolphins, the second team defense got picked apart a little bit by Michael Penix, the quarterback who we're still scratching our heads why Atlanta picked him number 8 when they just signed Kirk Cousins to that big contract. But look, Kirk Cousins, by the way, I should mention, he's recovering from that torn Achilles or that Achilles injury last season. He's still not moving around fully. He can move a little bit, but he's not moving around fully. I thought Michael Penix threw some pretty good passes as practice wore on, as we got later into the 11-on-11s. A lot of short passes, but accurate passes. He didn't light up the Dolphins secondary. I would say he kind of peppered the middle and the corners of the field, but he made good decisions. Having said that, though, I thought the coverage was pretty good. The second team defense wasn't as good as the first team defense for the Dolphins, but if this was a game, I would say the Dolphins defense definitely would have gotten the better of the Falcons offense, with the Dolphins second team defense maybe giving up a little bit, but still would have put in a winning effort.
Very nice. Okay, I'm going to come back with a point on offense after we hear from Michael Vick and BetUS.
Michael Vick at BetUS.com. Catch an incredible 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits, plus 10% gambler's insurance. BetUS, my online sports book and casino.
Okay, so as Michael mentioned, the BetUS has a current promotion, and I am looking for it here. A 125% deposit match on your first 3 deposits, up to $2,000. And I will show you my link here. Use my link to visit the website right here. I will also put it in the comments after the episode. Next for me on the offense, let's talk about the offensive line a little bit, because this is what Dolphin fans want to know about. Again, it was a little bit spotty, as I mentioned. There were a couple of plays. I noticed twice 2 really good blocks by Patrick Paul on running plays, which certainly is good to see. Patrick Paul, who still, to me, in an ideal world, doesn't see the field in 2024, barring injuries. I think it's a good season for the Dolphins. If he doesn't see the field, let him learn under Teron Armstead, pick his brain the entire season, develop the technique and all that. But it was encouraging to see that. I saw Austin Jackson also with a good block, kick-out block on a running play. And then there were the issues with the blitz pickups, particularly toward the latter part of the practice. Again, defenders stop when they get close to the quarterback, put the hands up. There's no touching the quarterbacks. If you want to say the Dolphin quarterbacks might have been sacked 4 times, maybe. There were a couple of plays where Tua didn't really. There was one play where Lorenzo Carter, who's an edge defender for the Falcons, came in like this, was right on top of Tua, wouldn't have had a chance. And that speaks of a complete breakdown. It was like completely untouched at the line of scrimmage. In terms of the running plays, as I mentioned, there were a couple of decent runs. There were a couple of good runs up the middle. Jeff Wilson ran very well. Chris Brooks, it was funny because we're taking attendance. Nobody's seeing Chris Brooks, and we're wondering where he is. And then lo and behold, he carries the ball. And the first time he carries the ball, he makes this really nice lateral cut at the line of scrimmage to bounce outside. And well, there's Chris Brooks. He's out here. Raheem Mostert didn't necessarily get much. Jalen Wright had one play. It was the first time all training camp that I've seen the burst, which is his calling card coming out of Tennessee as a 4th-round pick. This was another play where he started off toward the middle and then he bounced it outside and he got outside fast. And that was really impressive. Savon Ahmed still not practicing, still wearing that walking boot around his
left foot.
Left foot. Thank you very much. And then as far as some of these guys on the interior, there was one bad snap from Aaron Brewer to Tua, which was low, and he bobbled a little bit. There was one high shotgun snap to Mike White that seemed to me catchable, but he bobbled it. But as far as whether I'd be lying if I said I noticed anything, drastic for any of the interior offensive linemen, specifically the 3 guys at the top of the depth chart, which was released Monday: Robert Jones, Aaron Brewer, Aaron Brewer, I believe.
Yeah, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron Brewer and Liam Eichenberg. Your turn.
Boop, I'm going to take you kind of an old school thing. You used to say you want your defense to be strong up the middle. In the passing era, I'm not so sure that that's true anymore.
Isn't that baseball? Catcher, second baseman, shortstop, and center fielder?
It is. It is also interior defensive line, inside linebackers, and safety. And so from that standpoint, Poop, we know the Dolphins have questions from Christian Wilkins not being there. From today, 2 of the inside linebackers, Jordan Brooks and Anthony Walker Jr., were not present. And at safety, Jordan Poyer was not present. And so the Dolphins did okay up the middle. And like I said, we didn't see a lot of blitzes, a lot of stunts and twists. I'll tell you this, though, Poop. I want to see what Anthony Weaver does tomorrow. Just as I said with Javon Holland and Kyle Pitts the next day. Let's see what the adjustments are, because the Dolphins did have defensive success. I would imagine, and I don't know what the practice rules are, how much you can blitz and all that kind of stuff. But regardless, I would imagine that the Falcons will go over technique and fundamentals with their linemen, with their offensive players. They'll try to get stuff corrected. Let's see how Anthony Weaver coaches these guys up, and let's see how the Dolphins respond. Now that the Falcons are kind of on them and kind of know what they're going to do, let's see how they respond on day 2. But look, day 1, even with your missing personnel up the middle, I thought the Dolphins defense turned in a good performance. I will say this, though. Benito Jones did a decent job in interior defensive line. Thierry play. I saw Neville Gallimore pursuing on a pass play, but I'm not convinced that they're there yet as far as the interior defensive line. We know Zach Sealer is solid. I need more convincing. So that's one thing I'm going to be looking at tomorrow, Poop. How what Weaver does, what the players do on day 2, and what the interior defensive line does on day 2 against the run and the pass.
This is where we should mention that it was indeed Benito Jones who's listed as the first team.
Yeah.
The way the Dolphins do their depth chart is defensive lineman, defensive lineman, defensive lineman. They don't differentiate between ends, DTs, or nose tackle. I think we can all agree Benito Jones would be the nose tackle. Anyway, but he's listed as one of the 3 D linemen along with Zach Sealer and Calais Campbell. I don't know if it's a huge surprise that it's Jones alongside him. We knew Campbell and Sealer would be 2 of the first-team players. And again, this is a depth chart that the Dolphins release because they have to. And there are certain rules that you will see. You will not see a rookie, with very few exceptions, being listed particularly high. Generally, they're at back of the line, and so learn your way up. For example, Malik Washington, as I said yesterday, 5th on the depth chart at wide receiver behind Braylon Sanders and I think Tyreek McGowan, for example. Go ahead.
Let me mention, when you're mentioning this, Quentin Bell and Emmanuel Ogbah are the starting edge rushers, not Chop Robinson. Quentin Bell, a quiet day today. I'm not worried about that. Yeah, right. Flash in the pan, right?
That's how quickly we turn on him.
That's right. This was his, I would say his most quiet day since training camp started, probably. But I'm not worried about that. I'm really not. Let's see how Quentin adjusts on day 2, because they had some success against him on day 1. Also, Grayson Murphy, a fairly quiet day. Both of them flashed. There was a couple of plays that I noticed, both of them. But I do want to see what they do on day 2. But yes, it as far as the starters on defense at the edge, yes, it's Emmanuel Ogbah and Quentin Bell at the corners, Jalen Ramsey and Kendall Fuller, linebackers David Long Jr. and Jordan Brooks, and then at the safeties it's Javon Holland and Jordan Poyer, just to kind of close the loop on that.
You forgot Cater. How dare you?
Cater in the slot. Cater in the slot.
The Dolphins cheat because they do 12 on offense and 12 on defense. They do right. 2 running backs and a fullback on offense, which is why you have Raheem Mostert as a starter, Devon Achane as a starter, Alec Ingold as a starter. Yep. So, and this is where I should mention, because you mentioned the Dolphins being without Jordan Poyer, Jordan Brooks, and Anthony Walker Jr. Those are multi-day absences as well. Yeah. So the Dolphins do have some injury issues. Again, we generally don't get a ton of information in those situations. Generally speaking, it's guy will be back at some point. I'm not concerned. It's not long-term. And that applies to those guys. It applies to Jalen Waddle. It applies to Eric Ezukama, who still hasn't returned. And at some point, this reminds me of Nick Saban 2005, where he was talking about, I want to say the name was, Travis Webster. For some reason, he was a cornerback from LSU who was a draft pick, who had played for Saban. Travis Daniels, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Who had played for Saban at LSU, who had an ankle injury, and Nick Saban kept telling us it was like day-to-day, whatever, and 6 weeks later, he's still day-to-day. So we take that for what it's worth. Okay, my turn. Let's talk about the quarterbacks. As I tweeted, Tua looked very sharp. Again, the highlight was that long bomb to Tyreek, and then Tyreek, after practice, made it a point to say, and then we should stop with the Tua can't throw a deep pass, as if that's been a topic anytime recently. And I've said this before. Go back to his rookie year against Cincinnati. From the 10-yard line, he throws a perfect strike to Jakeem Grant, like 55 yards down the field. Should have been a 90-yard touchdown. Jakeem dropped the pass. The issue of Tua being able to throw a bomb was never actually a story. And when certain people, guilty as charged, talk about the arm strength being an issue, it's not about the ability to throw a bomb when he can set his feet, because he can do that. And his accuracy on those has gotten progressively better. Okay. So I don't know why, well, I do know why, but Tyreek, it's not a talking point anymore. Like, seriously. Anyway, and I would make the point that was a perfect pass, even a better throw than the one in practice. And again, this going to disprove Tyreek saying can't get deep against our own defense, because he got deep yesterday. Remember the one that the Dolphins highlighted? Yep. That one to throw, Tyreek had to make a little bit of a tough catch, even though it still was a good pass. Today, I mean, it was in stride like this, beautiful. I'm not even sure that was Tua's best throw of the day. He had one in the seam between defenders to Tyreek McGowan, and he had some zip on that ball. That to me might have been his most impressive throw. And then generally he was very accurate. He did have one pick, and what happened on the play, it was a fake handoff, quick rollout, and threw the ball very quickly. And it looked like he was throwing to a spot, and River Craycraft looked like he ran a route that Tua wasn't expecting. The ball wound up being 5 yards behind him. And the aforementioned Mike Hughes, the one who got smoked by Tyreek Hill on the bomb, was there and made a nice low grab for the interception. And after the play, as River Craycraft walked back to where the Dolphins players were, Tua walked up to him and kind of confirmed my suspicion that it was just a mix-up there. It wasn't like he was trying to force the ball, or like he had a pick in training camp where Jordan Poyer stepped in front of Braxton Berrios, where he either didn't see the guy or the ball took too long to get there. This was a mix-up. It's one of those where, it happens. As far as the other two quarterbacks, Mike White, Skylar Thompson, they had I would say they were better than they usually have been so far in training camp. There were a couple of nice throws. I think it was Mike White had a really nice completion down the middle of the field to Jaquan Burton, the rookie free agent from FAU. Skylar also had a nice throw. And like I said, generally speaking, they were better than they have been so far in training camp, but clearly Tua was the best of the three quarterbacks. Defense.
Well, let me go here with you, Poop. Did you see? I've written a column that everything that I write this year about the Dolphins is against the backdrop of, was this good enough to win a playoff game? And so I'll ask you if you saw anything for offensively that was good enough to win a playoff game. But I'll go first defensively. This is kind of going from the micro to the macro, and it's way too early to say could they win a playoff game. However, we're looking at improvements from last year, really, and the big improvement that I saw was on that pass rush, that you were getting to Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix again with limited personnel, no Jalen Phillips, no Bradley Chubb, Quentin Bell having an off day, a low-key day. No blitzes, hardly any stunts and twists, meaning, the defensive linemen looping around each other to confuse the offensive line. This was just pure muscle against muscle. And I don't know if I didn't expect to see that with this crew. If you would have told me that they did this with Christian Wilkins and Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, I'd have been like, okay, but you did this without them. And that's very encouraging to me. That's something that tells me, okay, there's some improvement. This team might be able to win a playoff game, because that is significant improvement. I don't know if you saw anything like that, Poop. I'll tell you my thing offensively, and I know the Dolphins haven't showed us everything yet, but I haven't seen a whole lot different from the offense when you're talking short yardage, when you're talking involving the slot receiver, when you're talking involving the tight end. it's probably coming. And I've said this, I really do think this is the year that Mike McDaniel puts it together from a play calling standpoint, and that the talent comes together from that standpoint, that it's a more diverse offense. I have not seen it yet, but it's only 2 weeks into training camp. I'm not overly concerned about it.
I agree, it's very early, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the same old offense.
Yeah.
And I found it kind of distressing, even though we're August 6th, but they had a 3rd and 1 in practice today and they threw the ball. And it's like, and this is like, I said this to the other guys, like all this talk about the Dolphins want to be bullies and all that. I mean, to quote Jimmy Johnson, please. Okay. First of all, their identity on offense is always going to be speed and finesse. That's what they built their team around. Okay. So the idea of them being bullies, for example, were they not bullies for the first 3 quarters on defense against the Bills in Week 18 last year when they were up 14-7? I didn't see a lack of toughness on defense there. That's never been the issue. And on offense, again, that's not their identity. It's a missing element. And the Dolphins are never going to be a team that's going to just basically just pound the ball and run it 45. Again, there are always exceptions, but generally speaking, run it 45 times down a team's throat. That's not who they are. That's not how they're going to make their money. But they need to be better in those situations than 5 for 11 on 3rd and 1 runs as they were last year. So that from that standpoint, and we mentioned the tight ends. I didn't say anything. My notes on the tight ends, Julian Hill committed a false start. I'm trying to think. Durham Smythe had 1 catch on the outside. Who else? I didn't see Jody
Fortson might have had a catch, right?
Who?
Jody Fortson. But he's a forgotten guy. He's really trailing in that. Yeah.
No, he is. That was yesterday. I don't think Tanner Conner had a catch. Julian Hill had a catch, and he also had another one near the end zone that he couldn't come up with. It was a very quiet day for the tight ends, and this is your basic as usual. We should mention beforehand that the 2 coaches got all the players together in the middle of the 2 fields to go over the rules of engagement, which somebody broke at some point with that little skirmish you had at your end. But no, I want to see something more. Let me switch to the special teams, where Jason Sanders was 7 for 7, including a 50-yard field goal on the last play of the practice. I want to say of the entire practice on the near field. There was also a kickoff return session for both the Dolphins returning team and the Falcons returning team. And if there's one area where I would give Atlanta a clear nod, that would be the one. Dolphins didn't get a whole lot accomplished on their returns. Atlanta had 1, maybe 2 that was more successful. And then my dude, my rookie free agent man crush, Jason Mader, had 1 play on one of those kickoff coverage where he tackled the returner out of bounds. And based on what I was told, he also actually did a pretty good job overall on the opposite field as well. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're right. How about that? You're right.
How about
You're
that?
Right. Yeah. And I'll say this about the special teams, and I tweeted this. It was interesting that, on kickoff return, the Dolphins, everybody's experimenting right now. The Dolphins had a couple of instances where they had offensive linemen out there for kickoff return. The Atlanta Falcons did not. And so I say that either team had better results. Everything is still kind of jumbled up right now. But just in looking at how teams might approach this, I thought the approach was interesting. And I'll actually give Danny Crossman credit, because why not try it? Why not? You've got to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, see what's effective. So I will applaud Danny Crossman for that. But I thought it was an interesting tactic, considering Atlanta didn't go there today. So offensive lineman on the kickoff return. And then look, Poop, I think that, to me, one of the exciting things about this kickoff return is there's not a whole lot of guys deep. I think if you make that one cut and you kind of get behind the defense, you could be gone, right?
Yeah. No, this is where we should mention also that on the depth chart, Braxton Berrios is the number one punt returner, kickoff returner. He did not practice on Tuesday. Devon Achane is the number 2 kickoff return guy, and I love that because it's another way to get him out in the open space. And I think he plays that role in 2024. He's going to break one, if not 2. And there may come a time when opponents will be like, you know what, Dolphins get the ball to 30. We'll just kick in the end zone. We don't want to deal with that guy because, again, he's got that beep, beep speed, and I think that's really good. However, the flip side to that is I hate to use history as a precedent, but the Dolphins' kickoff coverage being what it was the past couple of years makes me a little bit, here comes that word, queasy about what that's going to look like in 2024.
I can't wait for this thing to get going, especially mid-season, because a couple of cuts, Poop, and these guys could be gone. They really could. And we talked to Jason Sanders today a little bit, and he was saying, I don't know yet. I don't know. We're going to have to wait until the regular season to see. But he did say that it has been mentioned, as a kicker, you might make more tackles than usual. And that tells you there's not a whole lot. Once you get past that first wave of players and you break through that line, there's not a whole lot back there. So a couple of cuts, some good blocks, and we could see the big plays that are desired on kickoff return. I'm really anxious to see how teams kind of manipulate, the formations and the blocking and all that. It could be a very exciting play, or it could just be, the kind of the dud that we saw in the Hall of Fame game. But I'm leaning more toward exciting, especially mid-season. I think this thing will probably blow up.
Yeah, except here's the thing. Even if you have a game where there's no return longer than, let's say, 27 yards or whatever, still beats kickoff, touchback, ball at the 25. I mean, yawn. As a football fan, yikes that it was boring. I don't like the fact that basically the onside kick is now almost obsolete, which is why I like that. I think it's the Eagles who have proposed it. If you're trailing in the fourth quarter, you can have the possibility of retaining the ball after scoring a touchdown if you convert a 4th and 15.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, again, from a football fan standpoint, I understand that there's like a fairness issue. If you built a lead the legitimate way, you're going to use a gimmick to allow the other team to come back. I get that. From a pure football standpoint, like, again, to me, the kickoff rule last year, complete snooze fest. And for those, I heard like some national radio people suggesting, well, why don't you move the kickoff back? Well, they're trying to maintain or increase the safety, and they're trying to avoid those head-on full blast collisions, which cause a problem. So this to me is a very good compromise, and I'm actually looking forward to it.
Yeah, and look, Poop, let's remind people that this isn't the NFL trying to really take charge of this. This is kind of the concussion lawsuit and CTE and all that kind of stuff. That's the NFL wants, let me say this. If they could have it their way, they would keep high-speed collisions in for the excitement of the game. But because of the threat of lawsuit and player safety, you kind of had to take that version of high-speed collisions out of the game. You've got to try to take it out as much as possible.
I agree. So if we're scoring this as a boxing judge,
Ooh.
I'm trying to remember what the numbering. It's like a 12-round fight, so it's 120 is the highest score.
10-point must system.
Yeah, there you go. Which car? What? Like, I don't know. 118, 116 Dolphins. That sound about right?
That sounds right. Very nice, Fruit. Very nice. That sounds right. Yeah. That sounds right.
I used to watch a lot of boxing in my very younger days. I've completely.
Now we know in Vegas it would be scored differently, right? The Vegas judge is how it goes in Vegas where the fights could be fixed. So yeah, but this is in South Florida, so 118, 116. I like that.
There you go. That's gonna wrap it up. We're gonna do this again tomorrow, and we Perk.
We are. Let's do it.
Absolutely. So thank you again to my good friend Chris Perkins from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Find his work at sentinel.com. Please like, subscribe, share. Again, big shout out. Thank you to BetUSA. This episode was powered by BetUS. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I will have my link to the BetUS website in the comments. Thanks everyone for watching. See you tomorrow.